Hello, this is Maciej Mikos welcoming you to World Talks, where every word matters. NATO has chosen its next Secretary General after more than a decade of Jens Stoltenberg's leadership. The outgoing Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte will take over his post on October 1st. To talk about the new NATO Secretary General and the challenges he'll need to face, we're joined by Oana Popescu-Zamfir, Director of Globalfocus Center and expert in international relations. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon.
So how would you characterize NATO's soon-to-be Secretary General?
I think what weighed very much in the balance in the choice of Mark Rutte for Secretary General is the fact that he's a very seasoned politician. He's seasoned both in domestic affairs and external affairs. He's a long-serving, high-level diplomat and politician. He's been able to bridge political divisions at home. If I'm not mistaken, he has led 4 different governments with a different composition, and often from the position of having only a minority in the Dutch Senate. He's been able to support the brokering of immigration deals with Turkey and with some North African nations. He's famous for expertly dealing with Donald Trump without necessarily caving to Trump's demands and rhetoric. So I think these abilities will put him in a good position to bridge current divisions and not just divisions, but a multiplicity of viewpoints among an alliance of 32 members that itself is going to face quite significant challenges in the years to come.
So you just listed some abilities of Mark Rutte. Now, how would you comment on the fact that he's been nicknamed Teflon Mark, and how highly do you rate this ability among politicians?
Oh, well, I mean, under the current circumstances at the NATO helm, that can actually be a quality. So I wouldn't really, I wouldn't worry about that primarily. I think rather what makes him somewhat controversial is not, I would say, is not necessarily his own personality, but the fact that he's Dutch and that the position of Secretary General has mostly gone to Northwestern Europe, with very few exceptions. There were many in Central Eastern Europe that would have liked to see somebody who is closer to the conflict in Ukraine, which drives NATO's transformation, taking this position. And at the same time, it is known that the Allies wanted to choose someone who would not be staunchly against Russia in a, let's say, systematic way, to keep the door open for what might be future re-engagement if and when the war in Ukraine ends and that becomes possible. So I would say these are rather the things that might be problematic with Mark Rutte. But then again, he needs to be a compromise candidate that represents the alliance, not just let's say, the optimal futures that we in Central Eastern Europe would like to see for the alliance. And we have to say that under his leadership, the Netherlands' support for Ukraine has been very significant, and that from years of very low defense spending, which was, I think, rather in the range of 1% of GDP, in more recent times, the Netherlands is approaching 2%. So they're not a champion, but they're not necessarily a laggard either.
Right, because his critics actually remind the public of his 2011 stance on Nord Stream projects, and well, he was big supporter of these Russian or European Russian projects back then. Now he's strongly anti-Putin, but as you're saying, he could quickly become pro-Russian if something changes soon?
I wouldn't call that pro-Russian. I think it's very hard to be NATO Secretary General and be pro-Russian. His predecessor, Jens Stoltenberg, has not only been a very capable negotiator and mediator, but very firm in his anti-Russian, anti-Putin positions, given that Russia is today what it is. So I would rather say Mark Rutte and his past positions put him in a place where, from if years from now we can imagine during the time of his term, either a Russia without Putin, or a Russia that has lost the war in Ukraine, or I don't know, any other scenarios for Moscow where NATO is again able to open the doors for dialogue, then Rutte would probably be more inclined to do so than some of the Central Eastern European contenders. And that's not, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that reflects the balance in the organization, and the fact that after all, the ability of NATO and Russia to constructively engage with each other is what provides security and stability on the continent. That is why we don't have security and stability on the continent, because one of these sides, namely Russia, is undermining that. But that doesn't mean that structurally we, as the North Atlantic Organization, don't hope for a future where we can do that.
Mm-hmm. Lastly, how do you think Mark Rutte will deal with NATO's 2% GDP spending on defense purposes threshold if he wasn't able to introduce the very same thing in Netherlands?
I'm not sure he wasn't able. Maybe he wasn't willing at the time. Also, let's not forget, domestic circumstances are complex in many countries, not just the Netherlands. I think NATO as a whole is very committed to the 2% threshold. It's not really just a matter of Rutte's ability to convince the other leaders. I think Rutte will face a very important challenge, not just in managing the future of Ukraine and support for Ukraine, but also in the upcoming US elections. Whether Trump returns to office, in which case things are even more complicated, or he doesn't. Either way, Washington will continue to step up the pressure on European allies to do more for their defense. And in all honesty, even the 2% threshold is too little if we are to seriously defend ourselves against the Russian threat. So this will have to be one of the priorities for the new Secretary General, to make sure that allies meet their commitments, and that we are where we should be, as long as we have an immediate threat on our borders. And let's not forget, we can easily imagine in the next few years, while Rutte might be at the helm of NATO, that there could be escalation in the Pacific, with China potentially attacking Taiwan. We could imagine a smaller scale conflict, perhaps localized conflict in the Western Balkans, as Russia will seek to activate its disruptors around European borders. So there will be multiple challenges confronting an alliance that's trying to meet its territorial defense targets, and that will require Mark Rutte to make sure that he is the first one who insists on European allies standing ready for this.
Many challenges lie ahead of NATO and Mark Rutte himself. Oana Popescu-Zamfir, Director of Globalfocus Center and expert in international relations, was our guest today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.